The ACLU wants detained immigrant kids reunited with their families, and they've got a number of conditions. Don't like the state's recently imposed gas tax? Well, you'll have a chance to repeal it in November.
Organizations like the NSA, the fact that they're working so hard to sponsor these kind of programs, that tells you something, right?
And forget about friendship bracelets and canoeing. These San Diego campers are learning to defend against cyber attacks. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Susan Murphy. The ACLU is asking a federal judge in San Diego to help reunite children who were separated from their families at the border. President Trump ordered the separations be stopped last week. They were an effect of his zero-tolerance policy toward illegal immigration. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero has more.
The ACLU says Trump's order to stop family separations has done nothing to reunite children already separated from their parents.
There are thousands of little kids separated from their parents, going to sleep every night wondering whether they're ever going to see their parents again.
The ACLU is now asking a judge to give the U.S. a deadline for reuniting families within a month. Children under 5 should be reunited within 10 days. The ACLU also says the government should let parents call their children within 7 days and stop separating families altogether, except when a parent is a danger to the child or is in jail. The ACLU is also asking the judge to forbid the U.S. from deporting parents without their children, something that has already happened. The U.S. is expected to issue a response Tuesday morning. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
The Customs and Border Protection Commissioner says his department has temporarily stopped prosecuting families who enter the country illegally. Kevin McLean says the move is in response to the president's order to stop separating families. He also says the administration's zero-tolerance policy is still in effect, but can't be enforced without taking kids away from their parents. McLean says he's working on a plan to resume prosecutions. Meanwhile, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis says the Trump administration has chosen 2 military bases in Texas to house detained migrants, Fort Bliss and Goodfellow Air Force Base. He didn't have many other details.
But I cannot confirm the specifics on how they'll be used. We'll provide whatever support the Department of Homeland Security needs in order to house the people that they have under their custody.
Officials say as many as 2,300 kids have been separated from their parents since the administration adopted its zero-tolerance policy in April. Farming officials are calling on Congress to pass what they say is desperately needed immigration reform. The California Farm Bureau is pushing for federal legislation that would provide a path to legal citizenship for farm workers who are living in the state illegally without enforcing them to first leave the country. They say their independent research shows 69% of farmers in California are suffering from a labor shortage.
The ag employees that work for our farmers and ranchers in California are very high skilled. It's a very technical job. You can't come to that specific crop and partake in those cultural practices without years of experience. So, we have so much respect for them, and that's why we continue to push and urge our members of Congress to include a solution for them and their families.
The California Farm Bureau says it plans to have members in Washington regularly in an ongoing effort to lobby Congress to pass immigration reform legislation. Conservatives in the state won a victory today by succeeding in their efforts to get a measure aimed at repealing the state's transportation funding law on the November ballot. They've been pushing to get rid of the gas tax that Democrats and one Republican sent to the governor's desk last year. The tax, along with an increased car registration fee, raises billions of dollars a year for road repairs and public transportation. The tax increased the price of gas by 12 cents a gallon. Governor Brown posted a tweet today denouncing a gas tax repeal effort, saying the measure is flawed and dangerous. He says the initiative was pushed by Trump's Washington allies. Two San Diego judges could also reshape the November ballot this month. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson says they will decide whether or not to throw out two plans to redevelop the Mission Valley Stadium site.
Thanks, everybody.
It was a year and a half ago on the Midway aircraft carrier flight deck that Soccer City backers launched a bid to lure an MLS expansion team to San Diego. FS investors offered a multi-billion-dollar plan to build a sports stadium, housing, commercial space, and a river park where the Mission Valley Stadium now sits. More than 100,000 voters signed petitions to put the plan on the November ballot.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here.
Almost a year later, San Diego State University officials unveiled their vision for Mission Valley. A sports stadium, housing, commercial space, and river park will become part of an auxiliary campus. Boosters also gathered more than 100,000 signatures to claim a ballot spot in November. But last month, San Diego's city attorney asked the courts to do something that's rarely been done: kick the two voter-backed measures off the ballot. Mara Elliott argues neither initiative protects the city's interests. She says the measures conflict with the city charter, state law, and interfere with government functions. She calls her request a pre-vote legal review. Councilmember Barbara Bree was convinced and supported the move.
I'm not a lawyer. I did vote to go forward with lawsuits because I believe it's important, if we can give voters clarity about legal issues ahead of the election, it's the right thing to do.
Bree is a local backer of the SDSU West plan to sell 130 acres of the Mission Valley site to San Diego State. She agrees with the city attorney that the initiatives might exceed the voters' power to act at the ballot box.
So what I wanted was legal clarity. So if people vote on something and later it's found illegal, why we should have told them ahead of time that it was illegal.
Elliott has hired outside legal counsel to help with the case, and that will cost the city money.
Why are we spending money to try and take something off the ballot that 250,000 or approximately voters in San Diego said they wanted to see go to the ballot?
Councilmember Scott Sherman represents the Mission Valley area, and he's a longtime supporter of the Soccer City plan. Sherman voted against the city attorney's request in April's closed-door meeting, but ended up on the short end of a 6-3 vote.
Yeah, we're paying our own attorneys, we're paying an outside firm, we're possibly paying the legal cost of the other side when this comes down and goes to the ballot. And we're spending all of that money on something that we don't even know will pass the ballot. Having a city attorney with concerns about a local initiative is nothing new. Jan Goldsmith held the job in 2016 when Measure D was on the ballot. That complex initiative, championed by Corey Briggs, could have set development rules for the Bayfront and Mission Valley. Goldsmith saw legal flaws in the measure, but he chose not to ask for removal from the ballot.
We chose on the Briggs initiative to actually give that advice in public and not attack it, so that the voters, council, everybody knew if this thing passes, it's muddy waters.
Voters ended up rejecting the measure soundly at the polls. Goldsmith says it's very rare, though possible, for a judge to pull a voter-backed initiative off a ballot. He says this situation is complicated by the fact that there are two competing measures facing challenges in separate courtrooms.
It's a really difficult situation. It's certainly possible that a judge could throw both of them off, throw one of them off. It's unlikely because that's not the way the judges act, and that's not what the court decisions basically say. Do everything you can to keep these initiatives on the ballot.
KPBS reached out to City Attorney Mara Elliott to talk about the writs of mandate. Our email requests were not returned. When KPBS approached her outside City Hall, she declined a chance to comment, saying litigation is ongoing. Elliott referred KPBS to the news release on her website. Hearings are scheduled for each issue in July. The city is hoping for a decision before August 6th, which is the last date for election materials to be filed for the November ballot. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
KPBS is a service of San Diego State University. San Diego County supervisors are set to vote on a massive budget tomorrow. More of it would fund social services, health care, and other safety nets for the region's poorest residents.
The supervisors are set to vote on a $6.3 billion budget, an 8% increase over last year. It places major emphasis on treating people with drug or alcohol addictions who can't afford private rehab.
But it's a federal issue.
Health and Human Services Director Nick Mascione says the funding for individualized drug and alcohol treatment programs would triple. It would help tackle the opioid crisis that claims hundreds of lives annually.
So we're going to be expanding the amount of residential drug treatment. We're going to be expanding the amount of outpatient services. Where are you going to be expanding in terms of sobering homes?
Under individualized treatment, patients will be connected to a case manager who follows them through rehabilitation and transitions.
Getting a job, being able to maintain a home.
Alfredo Aguirre is director of the county's Behavioral Health Services Department. He says patients would also be linked to transportation, housing, and employment.
So when people complete programs, we can stay connected to them because, as you know, people with addiction, it's a lifelong recovery process. And we want to make sure that we stay connected to individuals to make sure that they, to prevent relapse.
The program is set to begin July 1st.
Ahead of next week's deadline to challenge California's aid in dying law, we're now getting a look at how many people have taken advantage of it. The Public Health Department shows nearly 400 people have taken a prescribed drug to end their lives. Opponents of the law are fighting the law in court over a technicality. They say lawmakers broke the rules when they passed the law during a special session. They have until next Monday to appeal the ruling that reinstated it. Cal State San Marcos students are helping the city of San Marcos knock out a backlog of projects, from parking studies to marketing videos. KPBS education reporter Megan Burks says the partnership is also helping students get their hands dirty with real-world problems.
We came one day just to do research, my team and I, and so we were interviewing Heather, the nutrition specialist, and she said, well, wash your hands, get the gloves on, like, it's time to go. So we jumped in, we started doing some service, lunch service.
Lunch service at the San Marcos Senior Activity Center. Last semester, the city recruited Cal State San Marcos students to audit the center's volunteer program and make recommendations. Danielle Admenderis and her classmates set the center up with a new online application, recruitment packet, and special software to track volunteer hours, a big upgrade from the pen and paper it uses now.
I was very impressed. I'd seen some rough drafts, and I'm a big editor, so I thought that it would need some edits, but I would say largely on the whole that we didn't have to tweak it hardly at all. It was really high quality professional work that we received.
Called Democracy in Action, the program aims to connect what students are learning on campus with work being done in their community.
This helped me tap into a community that I didn't really know needed us. And so that's what the Democracy in Action project really looks to do, is to bridge student skills and creativity and resources with the city's needs on various projects.
Admenderis graduated with a degree in human development and says she's more likely to work with seniors in the future. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
A summer camp in San Diego is teaching teens to protect and defend themselves. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says the camp helps them block threats online.
At the University of San Diego, a group of high schoolers are not taking a traditional summer camp. These students are learning about cybersecurity.
It's continually evolving because of all the technology that's being developed, and it's just something that you constantly have to be learning about and learning how to protect the information.
Jaden Simons is a student at La Jolla High who wants to study computer science in college.
I guess I was kind of always interested in computers from a young age, but I started taking Foundations of IT and Computer Science Principles, and I realized that I actually had an interest in programming, and then from that it stemmed to cybersecurity.
The week-long camp is made possible by a federal grant. Here, students will learn how to create and protect computer programs. They'll also study cyber forensics, which involves identifying and blocking online threats.
Cybersecurity and computers are growing, and they anticipate a deficit in good, employable people in the future, so these kids are in the right place.
Darren Bennett manages cybersecurity for the city of San Diego. Tuesday, he took questions from students eager to break into the cyber field.
Organizations like the NSA, the fact that they're working so hard to sponsor these kind of programs, that tells you something, right? It says, hey, they see the value and the importance of getting people that are trained up and know cybersecurity.
In addition to classroom training, students will get a behind-the-scenes look at the FBI's Cybersecurity Investigations Lab in San Diego. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the difficulty of reuniting immigrant families who've been separated at the border. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Governor Jerry Brown has declared a state of emergency north of Sacramento due to a wildfire. More than 8,000 acres have burned in Lake Country. The Pawnee fire has forced about 3,000 residents from their homes and has destroyed more than 20 structures. Fire officials are bracing for a potentially tough summer.
We're about 200 fire starts more than last year at this time, burning about several thousand acres more than last year at this time as well.
Fire officials say they don't know yet what caused the fire. It may get hot in some parts of the county, but overall we have another week of great weather ahead. Erin Calandra has tonight's forecast.
Good evening. I hope you enjoyed the beginning of the work week. The weather certainly is pretty nice, although we are seeing those extra clouds. The marine layer is kind of creeping in here during those morning hours and then quickly pushing back out to sea, and we have plenty of sunshine by lunchtime. Taking a look right now at the satellite radar, nothing is going on. It is awfully quiet here, and that's the case for all of the Southwest. It's going to be cooking in those interior areas. We're going to see temperatures above average for a lot of people in the deserts and also the mountains and everywhere away from the coast. So for tonight, we're talking 62 degrees, very comfortable with those clouds building again through those nighttime hours. And they're going to reach a little bit further inland now by morning time. And then again, they will be going back to sea, and we will see much more sunshine. So tonight in Ramona, 53 degrees, Chula Vista at 62, and Mount Laguna, 58 degrees. We have this cool breeze coming in off of the ocean, so it's going to be a bit chillier, actually closer to normal, I should say, along the coast. But those interior areas, it's going to be steamy with that warm air shooting up from the south. So taking a look at some of those temperatures for tomorrow, San Diego 74. Perfect conditions. That's right around where it should be this time of year. Chula Vista at 75, Borrego Springs at 111. Yes, it is supposed to be hot in Borrego Springs, but 111 is above average, and Mount Laguna at 85. Here we are Tuesday, high pressure in place. Everyone is still hot and sizzling even in the deserts. Over the next couple of days along the coast, you should expect to see temperatures slowly drop each day. By the weekend, it's going to be cooler, down to 72 degrees for the high. In the interior areas, we start off in those mid-80s, get a bit cooler by Friday. We're talking 79 for the high temperature, and a bit warmer by Saturday with lots of sun. And in the mountains, it's going to be great in the 80s, dropping down to the 70s. Very comfortable conditions with sunny skies. And across the deserts, it is going to be hot. Make sure you are drinking lots of water. Check on those elderly neighbors, the pets, and also the kiddos. Make sure everyone is staying safe in this type of heat. Susan, back to you.
A new book looks at the challenge of having an honest conversation about race. It looks back at a key meeting with Robert F. Kennedy and author James Baldwin. Author Michael Eric Dyson chronicles that meeting in a new book, What Truth Sounds Like. KQED Newsroom's Thoy Vu talked to him about how that conversation continues 50 years later.
And now I want to take a step back in history a little bit and talk about the premise of your book, which is the 1963 meeting between then U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy and the renowned writer James Baldwin to discuss race relations. It was supposed to be a friendly gathering, but what happened? It broke down. It became very bitter.
It was very contested. Initially, they met, Baldwin and Kennedy, over breakfast the day before. And because it was a rush meeting, Baldwin's plane was late when he got into to D.C. and then out to Virginia. The Attorney General had to go. He says, look, tomorrow I'm going to be in New York. Let's get together. They got together. He said, bring some of your friends. And when you're James Baldwin, your friends are Harry Belafonte, Lena Horne, Lorraine Hansberry, and Kenneth Clark, the famous psychologist. But they also brought a student activist there who was one of the most storied, along with John Lewis, activists ever, freedom riders, because he had been beat within an inch of his life. They got to the meeting. Kennedy wanted the black people to be grateful for what he and his brother were doing, Jack Kennedy, the president, and they were having none of it. They said, we're tired of this. We're tired of the pity-patter talk. The young man, Jerome Smith, said, you know, don't we worried about how we're being attracted to voices of rage like the black Muslims. Be concerned about a guy like me who's a nonviolent activist who's willing to take up a gun because I'm tired of all this. It was stunning. He tried to pivot away, that is Robert F. Kennedy, to the responsible, respectable black people, but they said the only person you need to listen to is him. So it got nasty, it got bitter. Kennedy sat there for 3 hours. He was angry. At the end of the meeting, he went back to his office. He sicked the FBI on the people who were there. He got dossiers from the FBI, but then he eventually said, you know what, if I were black, I'd be angry too. Maybe I should calm down. Maybe I should talk about race as a moral issue the way they wanted me to. And it changed his own life. And for the rest of it, 5 years remaining, by the time he died, he became known as one of, if not the most trusted white man in America for black people.
So that meeting really brought out the tension, right, between policymaking and the moral center.
That's right.
And how it evolves surrounding the conversation about race relations. And that conversation really isn't over. Where does that conversation stand today?
That's a great point. Remember when Hillary Clinton famously met up with Black Lives Matter people, and they said, what about your heart? How's your heart changed as you talk about public policy? She said, it ain't about the heart. If you got no policy that changes, we're going to be here 10 years from now, 20 years from now, talking about the same thing, because it's not what I think, it's not what I feel, it's what we do in terms of policy. That's still a clash. She has a point. Kennedy had a point. But the point of Baldwin and now of Black Lives Matter is equally important. Look, it's on the books that you shouldn't kill unarmed black people, but it keeps happening. So that's not the law. That's not policy even by itself. That's anti-black animus. That's the way in which people feel about and think about the other. So we need both social witness and public policy together so that we can make things better in this society.
And you write in your book that as bigotry resurfaces, and you point out, for example, the recent events like Charlottesville, and when you write about that, you write, quote, the lie is put to the belief that this is not American, this is not us, when indeed it truly is. Hasn't a lot of progress been made, though, since 1963?
Malcolm X said, if you stick a knife in my back 9 inches, pull it out 6 inches, you don't call that progress. It is. I mean, it's not as far in, but you're still killing me. Yes, there's been enormous progress. First black president, but look how he was treated. We followed up the first black president with a bigot in chief and a racist in resident like the present president, who makes no distinctions between bigots and people who are racists and anti-Semites and those who challenge that.
Even though he's pardoned recently a couple of African Americans and claims that he's, doing that and rising in the polls, as he says.
Justin Volpe, the man who put the plunger up Abner Louima's behind, was dating a black woman. Sleeping black doesn't mean you know black. So pardoning some black people doesn't mean you try to talk about a systemic problem that creates injustice in the first place that puts black people in prison. So yeah, he may be doing that, and thank God, I'm glad for that. But that doesn't address systemic issues. Individual intent is not systematic expression of injustice.
You make a surprising comparison in the book between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, essentially saying they're mirror images of each other. Can you explain that?
Well, look, I'm not suggesting that in any way that Bernie Sanders holds the offensive, odious views, the egregious views, racially speaking, inflammatory views of Donald Trump. But what I am saying is they're both older white guys who took a long time for them to understand about race. Bernie Sanders was equally cantankerous. Black Lives Matter came along. He was very fussy. He was very, bitter about it. He was like, no, I don't need to learn anything. People kept saying, hey, Bernie was an activist back in the 60s. Look, bruh, it's a Janet Jackson world. What have you done for me lately? So, yeah, I say that both of them are mirror images of each other in the sense that they don't understand the centrality and necessity of race in such a progressive fashion. Bernie Sanders, to his credit, is grappling with that and grasping hold of that in a way that Donald Trump shows no indication that he's willing to do.
And we just have about 30 seconds remaining, but you write that President Trump is treating the entire nation as black.
That's right.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that what black people have said to white America about how unfortunate we feel, how tragic it is for us to be disrespected, to be treated, to be dogged, to be talked about. This is what Donald Trump is doing to most of America now. Every morning he rises to excrete the feces of his moral depravity into a nation he's turned into a psychic commode. He's dogging people, calling them out their names. He's narcissistic. No matter what people do, he still treats them the same way. That's what it feels like to be black in a racist and bigoted country that refuses to acknowledge our humanity.
All right, Michael Eric Dyson, always interesting to have a conversation with you.
Thanks for having me.
San Diego International Fringe is in full swing. The event features more than 100 artists from San Diego and around the globe. They're performing 500 shows at multiple venues. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando shot this slice of Fringe. Tabled Manners involves a man on a blind date.
Oh, you're you're a stripper.
I prefer the term exotic dancing technician and consultant.
You're a stripping antique restorer.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
And are we ready to order? Not yet. We've been talking nonstop and really haven't had time to look at the menu. Did you know that Mayfield is an exotic dancing technician and consultant? Oh, you're a stripper? He prefers the term exotic dancing technician and consultant.
Thank you.
And I prefer the term conveyor of culinary dishes and fermented libations.
Tabled Manners performs tonight on the Spreckles main stage. The play was co-written by Michael Mizorani. He won the Outstanding Writing Award at Fringe 2 years ago. San Diego International Fringe runs through Sunday. Beth posted her guide to all things Fringe at kpbs.org. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.